I stood in the back of that banquet hall in my rented suit, the one my wife had ironed twice because the first time left a crease down the front, and I watched my daughter tap the microphone like she was about to give the most important speech of her life. She was. Just not the speech any of us expected. "Before we begin the toasts," she said, and she was smiling that wide smile she'd learned sometime in her 20s, the one that didn't quite reach her eyes, "I want to say something about where I come from." I remember thinking, good, finally, she's going to say something good. I was wrong. "I spent my whole childhood embarrassed," she said. "Embarrassed by our neighborhood. Embarrassed by our house. Embarrassed by our car. Embarrassed by our name." The room went quiet, not polite quiet, uncomfortable quiet. My wife reached over and took my hand. "My name is Merrick Callahan. I'm 63 years old. I live outside of Sudbury, Ontario, on a property my own father cleared with a chainsaw and sheer stubbornness back in 1971. I worked 31 years at the mine, shift supervisor for the last 12, and when they offered early retirement with a decent package, I took it. My wife Adele and I weren't rich by any stretch, but we weren't poor either. We had the house, we had a truck, we had savings, and we had a daughter named Sienna who we thought the sun rose and set on. You raise a child and you pour yourself into her. Every hockey game, every school trip, every tutoring session when math stopped making sense in grade 7. You scrimp on vacation so she can go on the class trip to Quebec City. You say no to the new truck for 3 extra years so her university is covered without loans. You do all of that, and somewhere along the way, somewhere you don't see, don't notice until it's too late, she starts looking at the things you don't have instead of the things you gave her. I don't know exactly when it happened. I think it was gradual, the way rust works. Not dramatic. Just slow and quiet, and then one day you look at the thing you built and it's eaten halfway through. When Sienna started dating a young man named Prescott Aldridge, whose father ran a commercial real estate company out of Toronto, I told myself it was fine. I told myself I was happy for her. She'd met him at the firm where she worked after law school, some mid-size corporate outfit downtown, and he was polished and soft-spoken, and he shook my hand the right way the first time we met. Firm. Looked me in the eye, but from the very beginning, there were small things. The way he'd look at our kitchen when we had them for dinner. Not a look of disgust, nothing you could call out. Just a quick, involuntary survey, the kind of look that calculates. The way Sienna would sometimes laugh a little too quickly at things that were said in front of his parents, as though she needed to show them she was in on the joke. His mother, Vivienne, was not a cruel woman. She was simply a woman who had grown up with money and had never once had to think about it. She asked Adele once, very pleasantly, whether we'd always been in Sudbury. She said it like Sudbury was a choice we'd made rather than a place we'd been born. Adele smiled and said yes. That night after they'd gone, I found her at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that had gone cold, just sitting there. "You okay?" I asked. "I'm fine," she said. But she wasn't. They announced they were getting married in the spring of 2023. Sienna called us on a Sunday afternoon and she sounded happy, genuinely happy, and I was glad. I told her we were thrilled. I told her Prescott was a good man and I meant it. Then the planning started. The venue they chose was a private estate east of Collingwood, the kind of place that has a website with soft music playing over drone footage. They wanted 220 guests, a plated dinner, an open bar, a live band, and a floral arrangement that the coordinator described to us as immersive. I did not know what that meant for flowers. I still don't. The total cost was $212,000. I want to let that number sit there for a moment, because I think sometimes people skim over numbers and they lose their weight. $212,000. For one day. Prescott's parents were contributing $50,000. They'd made that clear early, and I'll give them credit for that. It was more than most people would offer. Sienna and Prescott had savings they were putting in, but there was still a gap, and Sienna came to us with it the way you might ask a friend to help move a couch, like it was a reasonable thing, like the size of it wasn't staggering. She needed $68,000 from us. I sat with that number for 2 weeks. I went over our finances the way I used to go over shift schedules, carefully, with a pencil, looking for room. We had RRSPs we'd been building since my 40s. We had a TFSA. We had the house, which had gone up considerably since we bought it. And we had a small emergency fund that Adele and I called the quiet money. Savings we'd set aside for the things you can't plan for, medical things, the kind of emergencies that don't send you a notice. Adele had been having some pain in her hip for the better part of a year. She'd had one appointment with a specialist at Health Sciences North, and there was talk, careful, non-committal doctor talk, about whether she might eventually need surgery. Nothing urgent yet. But the quiet money was there for exactly that kind of not yet. I gave Sienna the $68,000. I told Adele it would be fine. I told her we had enough. I told her that we could rebuild the account over a couple of years on our pension and my retirement income. She didn't argue. She trusted me. That's the thing about Adele. She has always trusted me even when she probably shouldn't have. We wired the money in March. Sienna did not call to say thank you. I waited a week. I told myself she was busy with planning. Then another week. Then Adele texted her, and she sent back a thumbs-up emoji and a "Thanks, Dad, you're the best." And somehow that made it worse. Not because I needed the gratitude. I didn't. I needed to know she understood what it cost, that she held it the right way. She didn't. The months before the wedding, she called us less than she had before. When she did call, the conversations were surface things. The venue timeline, the rehearsal dinner schedule, whether we had appropriate clothes for the photos. She asked Adele once if she could maybe find something in a dusty rose or sage, because those were the colors and she didn't want the photos to feel off. A deal went to 3 stores in Sudbury and 1 in North Bay. She found a dress in a color the tag called blush taupe, and she wasn't sure if it was close enough, so she took a photo of it and texted Sienna, and waited 4 days for an answer that said, "It's fine, Mom, it's fine." I didn't say anything about any of this. What was I going to say? That I had given her $68,000 and still felt like I was failing an exam I hadn't been told I was taking? No, I kept quiet. I drove Adele to North Bay to get her dress altered. I picked up our gift card to the spa they'd registered for. They had asked for cash equivalents only, no physical gifts. And I put it in an envelope with a card that Adele signed first. I rented the suit. I got my hair cut. We drove down to Collingwood the Friday before the wedding and checked into a Holiday Inn off the highway, because the estate itself was reserved for immediate family on the groom's side, and a handful of other guests who'd been told early. We hadn't been told early. That was fine. I told Adele it was fine. The ceremony was beautiful. I'll say that because it's true, and I don't want to be the kind of man who can't admit a beautiful thing just because it hurt him. The light came through the west-facing windows at exactly the right angle in the late afternoon. Sienna looked stunning. She looked like someone from a magazine, and I thought about the night she was born, the way she looked at me in that hospital room, like I was the only certain thing in the world, and I had to breathe through my nose for a moment to keep myself together. The trouble started at the reception. We'd been seated at a table near the back, not the very last table, but close. The kind of seating chart decision that's hard to prove means anything but lands a certain way regardless. Adele didn't say a word about it. She unfolded her napkin and complimented the centerpiece and started talking to the woman beside her, who turned out to be a second cousin of Prescott's from Ottawa. The dinner was served. The toasts began. Prescott's best man went first. He was funny and warm, and he'd clearly written the whole thing out and practiced it, which I respected. Vivian spoke next, graciously, and she said kind things about Sienna, things that were genuine, and I could see they cost her something emotionally to say out loud. I softened toward her a little in that moment. Then Sienna stood up, and she started talking about where she came from. "I spent my whole childhood embarrassed," she said. "Embarrassed by our neighborhood, embarrassed by our house, embarrassed by our car." She paused. "Embarrassed by our name." I felt Adele's fingers tighten around mine. "The name Callahan," Sienna continued, still smiling, "meant something very specific where I grew up. It meant working class. It meant Northern Ontario. It meant, and I say this with love, it meant small." She looked around the room. "I always told myself I'd build something different, something bigger. And today, standing here, I really feel like I have." People clapped. Some of them didn't know what to do with the clapping, but they did it anyway. I did not clap. I sat very still, and I thought about the $68,000. I thought about Adele and her hip and the quiet money that wasn't there anymore. I thought about 31 years underground, breathing filtered air, watching my colleagues age faster than they should have because of what the work cost the body. I thought about my father, who came to this country from County Clare with $40 in a suitcase, and who had cleared that land in Sudbury and built something with his hands. I thought about what he would have felt hearing the name he'd given us described as synonymous with small. The speech ended. I smiled when people looked at me. I have always been good at that. After dinner there was dancing, and I danced with Adele, and she put her head against my shoulder and she said quietly, "We don't have to stay much longer if you don't want to." "I'm all right," I said. "Merrick, I'm all right," I said again. We stayed another hour. Sienna came by our table exactly once briefly to say hello to the cousin from Ottawa, and she touched my arm as she left and said, "Thank you for everything, Dad," in the same voice she might use thanking a caterer. Then she was gone again, into the crowd, into the lights, into the life she'd decided didn't have our name in it. We drove back to the Holiday Inn. Adele changed out of her blush taupe dress and hung it carefully on the hanger, and I sat on the edge of the bed and took my shoes off, and we didn't talk for a while. "She meant what she said," Adele finally said. "I know she's been meaning it for a long time. I know that too." We didn't cry. We were past the age where that came easily, and besides, there's a kind of hurt that sits too heavy for tears. It just settles into you and stays. 2 weeks after the wedding, Sienna called. She didn't call to process what she'd said. She didn't call to ask how we were. She called because she and Prescott had decided to do a honeymoon extension, a second trip to Portugal after the Maldives, and they were wondering if we could help with expenses. Not a lot, she said, just to cover the flight upgrade. I was standing in the yard when she called. The birch trees were just starting to go yellow at the tips. I said, Sienna, I can't do that. She was quiet for a moment. Dad, it's not that much. That's not what I said. I said, I can't. Is this about the speech? I thought about how to answer that honestly. It's about a lot of things, I said. But yes, Dad. I was just being honest. I said it with love. You heard that part, right? I had heard that part. I thought about telling her what I actually thought of that particular phrase. I say this with love, and the way people use it to license saying almost anything. But I didn't. I heard the whole thing, I said. I feel like you're punishing me for being real. I'm not punishing you for anything. I'm telling you I can't help with the Portugal upgrade because we don't have the money right now. You have your pensions. You have Sienna. I said her name the way I used to when she was small and doing something she knew she shouldn't. We gave you $68,000 3 months ago. Your mother may need surgery. That's where we are. The call ended badly. Not in a fight. There was no fight, exactly. Just a silence that stretched too long and then a goodbye that didn't sound like one. In November, I got a letter. It came to the house in a proper envelope, addressed to me by name. The return address was a law firm in Toronto. I stood in the front hallway in my reading glasses and I opened it slowly because the good things in life don't usually come as letters from law firms. And I wanted a moment before whatever this was arrived. It was about my Uncle Fergus. Fergus Callahan had been my father's older brother. He'd left Sudbury in his 30s and gone west. Vancouver first, then up to the interior, then eventually down into the Okanagan, where he started buying land in the 80s when land in the Okanagan was not yet what it would become. We'd lost touch the way families do when distance is long and years are full. I knew he'd done well, I didn't know the details. My father and he had a falling out somewhere along the way, something old and rooted and never fully explained. And the name Fergus was one of those names in our family that lived in a drawer you didn't open often. Fergus had died in September. He'd never married. He had no children. The estate, the properties, the investments, the accounts, was valued at $4.6 million after fees and taxes. He'd left it to me, left it to Callahan as the letter explained in dry legal language. He'd left it to the brothers line, to the name. I read the letter 3 times. Then I went and sat at the kitchen table. Adele came in from the back porch where she'd been pulling the last of the garden for the season, and I handed her the letter without saying anything. She read it once. Then she sat down across from me. We sat there for a long time. Callahan, she said finally. That's the name, I said. I want to be clear about something. I am not a man who believes in cosmic scorekeeping. I don't think the universe arranged this as a lesson. I think it was just the timing of things. Fergus dying in September, the lawyers taking a week to locate me, the letter arriving in November. Timing that happened to land the way it did. But I will admit that I sat with it for a long time before I told anyone. I didn't call Sienna. I didn't send her a message. I met with the Toronto lawyer, a quiet, methodical woman named Audrey who had been handling Fergus's affairs, and I began the process of understanding what I'd inherited and what it meant and what I wanted to do with it. What I inherited was not just the money. It was land, 60-odd acres in the South Okanagan, some of it vineyard lease, some of it undeveloped, and a portfolio of commercial properties in Kelowna that Fergus had been quietly accumulating since the 90s. The cash accounts were a smaller portion than I expected, but the overall value was real and it was solid. I asked Audrey, had he left anything to anyone before this? She said, he updated the will 8 months ago. You weren't always the named beneficiary. I didn't ask who had been before me. Some things you don't need to know. December came. Sienna called once, a brief, obligatory check-in, and it was stilted and careful, and she did not mention the Portugal call or the speech or the money. I asked about Prescott. She asked about my hip. She meant Adele's hip. I didn't correct her. Adele's surgery was scheduled for February, a total hip replacement. The surgeon at HSN was excellent, and the procedure was routine, and there was nothing to worry about, practically speaking, but you worry anyway. You worry because she's your person, and the idea of her under anesthetic in a room without you in it is something you have to actively choose not to think about. We paid for the surgery and the recovery and the physiotherapy without stress. For the first time in a long time, without any stress at all. That's what the quiet money is for. Sienna found out in January. I don't know exactly how. Small world, Adele mentioned something to her sister, who mentioned it to someone, the way things travel. But Sienna found out that her father had inherited money, and her first call came on a Tuesday afternoon, while I was out walking the back of the property. She left a voicemail. She said she'd heard some news. She said she was happy for us. She said she'd love to get together soon. She said it in that voice again. the smooth, managed voice of someone who has had to call difficult clients in a professional capacity and knows how to modulate tone for best results. She ended by saying she missed us and hoped we were well. I stood at the tree line at the edge of our land and listened to it twice. Then I called her back. She answered immediately. "Dad, I know," I said. "I got your message. I heard about Uncle Fergus. That's incredible. I didn't even know you two were close." "We weren't," I said. "It was the name. He left it to the name." A pause. "The name," she repeated. "Callahan," I said. "That's what the lawyers explained. He was particular about it. Old-fashioned that way." Another pause, longer this time. "Dad, I want you to know that what I said at the wedding, Sienna." "No, I want to explain what I meant. I was talking about how far I'd come, not about being ashamed of you. I hope you know that." I had prepared myself for this conversation. I had thought about it many times over the past weeks, and I had decided what kind of man I wanted to be in it. Not hard, not cruel, just honest. "I think you meant exactly what you said," I told her. "And I think you have the right to feel what you felt growing up. I'm not angry about that, but I need you to understand something. When you stood up in that room and called our name small with 200 people watching, with your mother sitting right there, and then called it love, I can't just set that aside." "Dad, Your mother ironed my suit twice," I said. "She spent 3 weeks finding a dress in the right color so your photos would be perfect. We gave you money we didn't have because we wanted your day to be everything you wanted, and you used that day to tell the room you were embarrassed by us." The silence that followed was the longest one we'd had. "I know," she said finally, and her voice had changed. The managed tone was gone. She sounded, for the first time in years, like herself. Like the girl who used to sit in the truck cab beside me on the way to hockey and fall asleep against my shoulder. "I know, Dad. I'm sorry. I believe you," I said. Can we come up after Mom's surgery? I want to see her. I want to see you." I thought about it. "Give us some time," I said. "Give us the winter." "In the spring, yes. Come in the spring." She said, "Okay." She said she loved me. I said I loved her too because I do. I have never not loved her. But love is not the same as trust, and trust is not rebuilt in a single phone call. That takes longer. That takes showing up differently repeatedly over time. Whether she'll do that, I genuinely don't know. I hope so. Adele came through the surgery beautifully. By mid-March, she was walking the length of the driveway without her cane, and by the end of April, she was out in the garden again, on her knees in the dirt the way she's always been happiest. Our property in the Okanagan is being managed by a local firm while we figure out what we want to do long-term. There's no rush. There doesn't need to be. I've been doing a lot of walking this spring. Down the laneway, through the birch stand, out to the edge of the back field where you can see the sky open up in a way that reminds you the world is still enormous and mostly indifferent to your particular troubles. I think about my father who came here with $40. I think about Fergus, who I barely knew but who apparently thought about our name enough to make a decision with it. I think about what it means to build something, not money, not property, not any of that, but a life that holds up. A life with people in it who know what you actually cost. Sienna is coming in May. She and Prescott have booked a hotel in town. I offered the house, but she said she didn't want to impose, which is new, and I think it's the right instinct. We'll have dinner. We'll be careful with each other at first, the way you are after something breaks and gets put back together. You handle it differently than before. More aware of the seams. I don't know if we'll ever fully go back to what we were. But I know this. I stood in the back of that banquet hall in a rented suit, and I heard my daughter say our name was small. And then the winter came, and Fergus's letter came, and Adele's hip healed, and the birch trees went bare and then started budding again. And the name she was so embarrassed to carry is the reason we're okay. It has always meant something. She just didn't know what.